Right now, you can pull out your phone and freeze a moment in less than a second. A face, a sunset, a memory locked in place forever. But for almost the entire span of human history, that was impossible. There was no camera, no lens, no shutter click, and yet somehow people still found ways to hold on to a moment. The real answer is far stranger than you'd expect, because long before anyone invented the camera, humans had already figured out how to capture light itself. Think about that for a second. You assume the camera was the beginning of image capture. It wasn't. It was the end of a very long chain of experiments, accidents, and strange discoveries that stretch back thousands of years. Start with a dark room, a tiny hole in one wall, sunlight from outside streaming through that hole, hitting the opposite wall and projecting an upside-down image of whatever's happening outside in full color in real time. No lens, no film, just light and darkness working together. This wasn't science fiction. It's called a camera obscura, which literally means dark chamber in Latin, and people noticed this effect astonishingly early. A Chinese philosopher named Mozi described the basic principle over 2,000 years ago, noting how light traveling through a small opening created an inverted image on a surface. Centuries later, the Islamic scholar Ibn al-Haytham, sometimes called the father of optics, studied this phenomenon in extraordinary detail. He built dark rooms specifically to observe it, tracked how the size of the hole affected the image, and wrote some of the earliest scientific explanations of how light itself behaves. So the camera obscura existed for over 1,000 years before anyone thought to actually keep the image it created. It could show you a moment, it just couldn't save one. Painters figured out what to do with that. Long before photography, some artists used the camera obscura as a tool, tracing the projected image directly onto canvas to achieve startlingly accurate proportions and perspective. Historians studying the work of Johannes Vermeer have pointed to unusual visual qualities in his paintings, soft focus in some areas, sharp precision in others, that strongly resemble the optical effects a camera obscura would produce. If that theory holds, one of history's most celebrated painters may have been using a proto-camera centuries before photography existed, essentially tracing reality instead of purely imagining it. But here's the twist. For most of human history, most people didn't have access to a dark room and a hole in the wall. So how did an ordinary person capture an image of a loved one, a moment, a memory? They used their hands and an astonishing amount of patience. Portrait painting existed for thousands of years before photography, but it was slow, expensive, and reserved almost entirely for the wealthy. A single portrait could take days or weeks of sitting perfectly still while an artist worked. For most families, that simply wasn't an option. So a strange workaround emerged. In the 1700s, a much cheaper, much faster method exploded in popularity: the silhouette. Named after French finance minister Etienne de Silhouette, whose penny-pinching policies became a symbol of doing something cheaply, the silhouette portrait used nothing but a candle, a wall, and a sheet of black paper. A person sat sideways in front of a light source, casting a sharp shadow of their profile onto the wall. An artist traced that shadow, cut it out of black paper, and mounted it onto a light background. In minutes, not weeks, an ordinary family could have a lasting image of a loved one's face. Notice what's happening here. Long before lenses and chemicals, people were already obsessed with capturing a likeness quickly and cheaply. The desire was always the same, only the tools were missing. Then in the early 1800s, a French inventor named Nicéphore Niepce did something no one had managed before. Building on the same camera obscura principle used for over 1,000 years, he coated a metal plate with a light-sensitive substance, placed it inside the dark chamber, and waited, not seconds, hours. Some estimates suggest his exposure time stretched across an entire day. But when he finally removed the plate, an image remained permanently fixed by light itself without a single brushstroke. It's often considered the first true photograph in history, a rooftop view captured not by hand but by chemistry. Notice the strangeness of that moment. For thousands of years, capturing an image required a human hand tracing light indirectly. Suddenly, light was doing the capturing itself. A few decades later, Louis Daguerre refined the process, cutting exposure time down from an entire day to just minutes, and the daguerreotype became the first commercially practical form of photography. For the first time in human history, an ordinary person could sit for a portrait and receive an image not painted, not traced, but genuinely, physically imprinted by light reflecting off their own face. Here's the part that quietly reframes everything. Every single method along this chain, the pinhole projection, the painter's careful tracing, the silhouette artist's steady hand, the chemically treated plate, was solving the exact same human problem your phone solves in half a second today. Hold on to something that light shows you once and never shows you again in exactly that way. That desperation to preserve a moment isn't new. It isn't a modern obsession created by phones and social media. It's ancient. It's the same instinct that drove someone 2,000 years ago to notice light leaking through a tiny hole and wonder if that fleeting picture could somehow be kept. So the next time you take a photo without thinking twice, notice what you're actually doing. You're finishing a project that started in a dark room in ancient China, continued through the careful hands of Islamic scholars and Dutch painters, sped up through a candle and a sheet of black paper, and finally succeeded on a metal plate on a French rooftop. Your split-second snapshot isn't new technology replacing an old habit. It's the same ancient habit, finally moving as fast as the moment it's trying to hold on to. You can pull out your phone right now and freeze a moment in less than a second. It took over 2,000 years and a very long line of patient, obsessive people to make that single second possible.